So we're going to cover four aspects of the K-12 education system and how 3Q, or I believe 3Q, can actually help you navigate this. The first part is going to be kind of a big picture of K-12 education and how, even though principals are measured on students, they actually don't have direct contact or that much direct contact. And then what are the important relationships between administrators, kids or students, and teachers. We'll talk about that in a bit. Then we're going to look at the five aspects of trust from Megan Tanshin-Morin and how those get negotiated or dialed in. And then we'll look at behavior over time graphs, because I think they give us a really good picture of how trust can be built, but it can also be lost. And then last but certainly not least, we'll talk about 3Q as a system that can actually help you build trust in a scalable, doable way without anybody being rock stars and without anybody spending a ton of time that maybe they don't have on these important relationships. So first and foremost, let's start with the big system, because I think it's one of those interesting pictures that really dials into how often we talk about relationships and their importance. So if you take the K-12 system, elementary school, secondary, doesn't matter. You have two big boxes. One's administrators, the other one is kids. And the fascinating piece to this, at least to me, is that administrators are often measured on kids, right? Their success. Do parents enjoy the education their child's receiving? Do they see value in it, et cetera, et cetera? But the reality is, administrators don't have they don't have a ton of direct contact with kids. They might see them for a discipline thing or on the playground or whatever. But as far as the day-to-day work that's done with children, it's done by teachers, right? So there's an intervening box here that cuts in between, right? And then if you connect these boxes, this is where it gets fascinating, right? The biggest change that students experience is between teachers, what the teacher's doing in their classrooms with them. The biggest leverage point that administrators have that affects those kids is right here, right, between teachers and administration, and what is the strength or weakness of that relationship. So if we break that relationship out, there's really five facets to trust. If you read Megan Tanshin-Morin's book, Trust Matters, and those five facets or five aspects of trust are benevolence, right? How much does this administrator actually want the best for me and share what I think is important? Competence, right? Can this principal, administrator, vice principal, whatever, do the job, right? Are they buffering all of the other aspects of education out away from me so that I can teach these kids like I want to? And then the three that I think 3Q actually ties in more with are honesty. Does this person tell the truth? Can I trust what he or she is saying to me? Do they mean what they say? Do they say what they mean? And then reliability. And reliability is basically honesty over time, right? Have they shown that they're honest this week, last month, this year? And then last but not least, the fifth one is openness. And openness really has to do with how does an administrator share his or her influence, his or her decision making, his or her information, right? Because as administrators, you often have, or we often have access to information that regular teachers don't. And so when you start to think about those five aspects of trust, 3Q offers an interesting way of sharing information, influence, and decision making in a one-to-one situation that's pretty powerful. So take a behavior over time graph, move to part 3. If you were to chart this, right, take an individual administrator and an individual teacher, what an administrator is hoping, or at least I think working towards, is building trust over time with a specific staff member or their whole staff, whatever the case may be. And what you really, ideally, I think what we want is this to go up, right? It may not go up over time. It may not be linear, right? It may not be a straight line, but moving from left to right, you want this to rise. But the phrase I think that's really critical in this, that's really helpful, in my opinion, is that trust is gained in drips but it's lost in buckets, right? So if you think about acts of betrayal, right, what's typically happening with betrayal is people have expectations, and those expectations get dashed, right? You think you're going in a certain direction, you think a decision's about to be made, you think this program's going to get funded, and then boom, right? It goes the other direction, or it's 180 degrees different than what you thought before. And so what it looks like in behavior over graph or behavior over time graph terms is you can be going up, incrementally, step by step, drip by drip, and then one act of betrayal can dash that whole thing. The fascinating thing on the trust piece is what you really need is a system that'll A, build trust over time, but then B, help you figure out when trust has been betrayed, right? So that you're not blindsided by that, or you don't think it was a big deal when the teacher does. So interestingly, with 3Q, it addresses all three of these. It addresses three major questions, right? How are you, right? Which gets to benevolence, competence, does this person have my back kind of things. How are we, which directly addresses that relationship between the administrator and the teacher. And then last but not least, how can I help you, right? Which gets into the openness, reliability, honesty pieces in terms of what are the specific things that I can do right now that'll help you. There's a couple key quotes that I think help on this. One is from Tom Friedman. He was interviewed on Charlie Rose many, many moons ago. And he said, those in power never think about power, but those without power think about it all the time. And one of the most interesting things I believe about 3Q is the ability, the willingness of a person in power, whether that's positional or informal, to give away that power to find out what's going on. The reality for most of you is you have to make hundreds of decisions as a principal, but you often don't have the information to make those decisions, right? You need to trust those frontline people, those teachers in the classroom with students in a way that's really pretty powerful. 3Q offers the opportunity to do that, right? 3Q gives you the opportunity to nurture that line between administrator and teacher in a very intentional, doable, scalable way. And over time, build trust. And over time, figure out if you have betrayed or if you haven't shared information, because perception is reality, right? I think all of us have been on staffs where a rumor or an offense from one teacher passes to another, and it can go south really fast. So thanks for your time.